BackChat basketball show, hanging out not with Ben Mallis, not with Greg Hire, but we've been very lucky, not as lucky as the San Antonio Spurs. We've got Liam Santamaria with us today. Liam, how you going?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
That's very good. So the San Antonio Spurs, they've bloody done it again. Robinson into Duncan into Wembanyama. It doesn't make sense, but the basketball gods have shined upon the San Antonio Spurs. How do you feel after seeing the Spurs get the number one pick again?
I love it.
Yeah.
I got to be honest. I love it. I was looking at that Final Four and thinking about who I would like to get that number one spot and to get Wemby and build with him. I really like the idea of Portland. I like the idea of him teaming up with LaMelo, of course, in Charlotte. But I don't know. There's something about Wemby that just feels like he fits the Spurs. Maybe it's because he's an international. Maybe because he's a number one draft pick that's a big guy, like the Admiral and Big Fundy, and then I just like the fact that in the twilight years of Greg Popovich's NBA head coaching career, he's going to be able to work with Wemby and get his career underway.
Yeah, he's going to get, for the last 3 or 4 seasons, people are saying, oh, this is Pop's final year, and seemingly keeps getting dragged in. And now I saw a tweet, someone saying, oh, Popovich is going to be coaching as like a brain in a jar in like 15 years with Wemby. So I don't know. I wonder what that means for him if he's like, well, buckle in for another 10, 15, or he could, I don't know. Why would you leave now? You got such a good opportunity with this. So,
yeah. It's been interesting to watch that over the last few years and to think like after the teams that he was working with, why is he still doing it with these groups and these young players? And then, he's going to have Wembanyama in there. And I just feel like also just the stability of that organization. And it does feel like one of the more sort of international NBA franchises as well. Of course, with Ginobili and Tony Parker and Boris Diaw and these kind of guys over the years. And you've still got Pop and you've still got R.C. Buford there at the helm running the organization. It feels like a really stable, really comfortable, solid franchise for him to land at.
Exactly. And he was pumped as well. There's some video of him seeing it. And look, I don't want to shit on any teams out there, but the Hornets have continually been mediocre at best. And the Pistons, like you'd be hoping not to get to those teams. So he'd be absolutely stoked to end up at the Spurs, where they basically tank for a year. I mean, they haven't been good for a while, but they basically tank for 1 year and then they're good again. It's very frustrating. As a Mavs fan who's just, I don't know what we're doing at the moment. We ended up with the 10th pick, which is not an absolute nothing burger. Just to see a team like the Spurs, like, let's just be really shit for a year, get a generational talent, and move on is quite frustrating. Liam, we have sort of moved on pretty quickly, but I usually ask our guests one question at the start of every episode of the BackChat Basketball Show, which you can find us on Instagram, BackChat_basketball. Liam, you've played basketball. You've been a pro basketballer in your career. Now you're doing great things in the media. But what's your greatest sporting achievement not in the basketball realm? I'll tell you mine. I'll give you some time. I'll pad for you. So I was an elite cricketer when I played for Chewett Hill Cricket Club. And you're not from Perth, but Chewett Hill's elite club. It's big time. 5 for 16 in a grand final, bowling leggies. Cleaned up the tail end. We still lost the grand final, which is unfortunate. But that's probably the greatest thing I've ever done in the sporting realm. What about you? And you can't use basketball because you've been a pro. It's only fair.
Well, not using basketball makes it very hard for me because I've been sort of very specific right from when I was really little. My parents tried hard when I was a little tacker to kind of broaden my horizons and get me to try different things.
Yep.
So I'll reach into kind of those experiences. I played 1 season of cricket for Camberwell here in Victoria. I don't know which team I was in terms of, but I would have been maybe 9 or 10 or something like that. And I my first time bowling, my first ball mid stump out of the ground.
Out of the ground. Bowling heat as a kid.
Yeah. So it's literally actually my only cricketing memory. Apart from I can remember sort of maybe just being in the nets at practice and kind of getting a sense of what this different environment was like compared to my, what I just knew and understood well in the basketball space. But apart from that, the only thing I can remember from that one season was taking the mid stump out of the ground and just running around like I was Craig McDermott with my
Very good.
finger held high.
Well, that's good. We'll take that. Let's go back to the. Sorry to sort of just take a sidebar there. Let's go back to the draft lottery. So, the one team that I feel worse for is the Houston Rockets. So they were so awful, and every guy on there that played well was basically playing to try and get more money on their contracts later on. Like I had no interest in winning games. Well, from my point of view, anyway. And they end up with the 5th pick. Is that like? Do you think that's worth all the shit that they've done this year, like getting that 5th pick, or do they go again and go absolute like be really bad again next season?
Were they the 5th pick, or I think they weren't they in that top 4 with
I'm
Portland
pretty
and San
sure.
Antonio
Maybe
and
I'm
Charlotte? I
maybe
felt
I'm
like
wrong, but
Houston
I
was
just looked
still
at
in there.
the Ringers mock draft, and they've got Spurs, Hornets, Portland. Oh, Rockets 4th, sorry, and the Pistons got the 5th.
Yeah,
But
it was
still,
the Pistons that slipped out.
yeah, that's right. So
They had the hard luck story.
that's right. So those two teams, it's pretty rough to be that bad, and then you lost your coach. So to be those bottom teams, like you just have to go again, right, and be really bad.
Yes and no. I mean, they're both in kind of rebuilding processes right now, and that is just sometimes how the lottery works out. Sometimes you bounce up higher and you win. The basketball gods smile on you in that regard, and sometimes you drop a spot from where your projections were going to be. But also, it's also how the draft works out sometimes.
Yeah,
It's not always the first. I mean, it's going to be this time.
yeah,
We all feel very confident about that. But it's not always the teams that pick higher than you that end up with the better players or the franchise players moving
yeah,
forward. It was Jason Tatum what was he, the 3rd pick?
yeah. That's true.
When he was coming through, and here he is having 51 points in a closeout conference semifinal game, and he's a franchise piece that the Celtics kind of built around and play off now. And Nikola Jokic, I mean, what was he? I mean, he wasn't.
Yeah, no clue.
Yeah, I mean, so it's more. It's sometimes it's about where you land. Clearly, in this case, getting the number 1 pick was the enormous prize.
Yeah,
And it's been that way a number of times over the history of the NBA and LeBron and other examples of that for sure. But sometimes you might find the guy that turns out to be, if you were to redraft years down the track, the guy you might have picked 1st or 2nd overall, and maybe you found him at pick 4 or 5. So,
yeah,
I think that's kind of the mentality that they need to take to say, hey, listen, like this is where we are. This is the pick we have. Let's see if we can, through our scouting and our player evaluation and looking at the roster that we have, we can find the right guy, and others maybe around us find the wrong guys.
yeah. I this morning sacrificed a baguette for my Dallas Mavericks, hoping that it would sort of summon something from the basketball gods so that we could move up in the draft. There was higher chance of the Mavs moving out of that pick because they had traded to the Knicks the protection. So they had a higher chance of moving out of that pick than moving up. And I just thought, of course, it's going to happen. We're going to lose our pick to pay for the sins of our past of trading for Kyrie and, I don't know, doing all sorts of bad stuff from the front office. I'm a pessimistic Mavs fan. I'm not sure if that's coming across or not. What do you
Are
think?
you happy with Luka being your foundation piece that you're
Yeah,
building around moving forward?
I think this year was a real he's been so good like from the very beginning, and like he's never really had many growing pains, and he's like been just flushed with he's flushed with talent, and we've been very lucky and haven't really had anything bad go wrong in terms of Luca. And I think this last year was real like the thing that the growing pains, and I reckon he's going to come back really strong next year. I just don't think we got the team around him at all. Like I think I don't know. Jalen Brunson would have been a very nice piece next to him, but I've gone on that forever, about that forever on this show. So I'm not going to keep making
You,
listeners hear about Jalen Brunson. But
you know, the thing that I always go back to with the Mavs and watching them at the moment is not re-signing Tyson Chandler the
yeah,
year after you won the title.
mm,
I feel like that you talk about the sins of the past, like,
oh yeah,
you know, like
blowing up that
drafting
team.
Luka was the opposite, right? Like you
Yep,
got him at pick 3. That's a great result. But I just felt like not going just all in and paying whatever needed to be paid to re-sign Chandler that year
yep,
and go for, just go for it again while you're in that window with Dirk. I
yes.
think you're still paying for that.
Absolutely, because Mark Cuban was trying to be really smart and was talking about cap space and it's going to be super valuable. And then it meant absolutely nothing. Like there was so much talk around like this is the best thing for the team. And I agree. Like, why wouldn't you just go for it? Like, if you lose, if you end up seventh seed, at least you went for it with
Mm,
championship
mhm,
aspirations, not just like
mm.
throwing it all in, which is why I'm frustrated by them not trying to go for the play in as well, because we've seen now in the West, the Lakers, right, are up against
Yeah.
the Nuggets, which I think the Nuggets will win easily. But
Mhm.
still, you just don't know. You don't know how the cards will fall. You don't know which superstar. You like Jokic could get injured, and the team like the Nuggets are an easy beat. Like that's and now we've got the 10th pick, and they're probably going to trade it. So do
Oh,
you?
you're
So
so sad. You're really bringing my mood down, I gotta be
sorry.
honest.
What do you do if you get the 10th pick? It's like you did say you can find the gem, right? Franchise
Yeah.
guys, but the 10th pick in the last like 20 years has been just nothing. Like I don't know if many of them are still in the league. For some reason, the 10th pick is cursed.
We nailed a pick right around that time. When I say we, I'm a big Phoenix Suns
Yes, we'll get to your
fan.
Suns. Yeah. So who have you gotten in that sort of area?
Pick 13.
Yep.
What year was it? 2015.
Okay.
Devin Booker.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and that was a case like at the time where it was like, I, I get, we all get hits and misses in terms of our evaluation and what we, when our team drafts a player, we go, oh no, and he turns out to be terrific. Well, this was a guy at the time I was like, bam, at the 13th pick, that just feels like a home run
Yep.
because, he has the chance to be really, really special. And, now he is that, he's an all
Mm.
NBA type of guy. So
Okay.
keep the faith.
Yeah, keep the faith.
Man.
All right, I'll keep the faith. How about you and your son? So I thought when you got Durant, it was over. I thought like the year's done. You guys would win the championship easy. To then get to lose in the second round, like how do you feel? Do you think it's a success? And we won't go down the path of failure as success, like Giannis ways. But I just mean like, do you think are you happy with the result given the team that you had?
No, really unhappy. If you're a championship contender and you don't get to the conference finals, you get bundled out in that kind of realm, then it's really disappointing. And we were definitely championship contenders. That said, had we had Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton on the floor in that game, I don't think we get blown out.
Yep.
Maybe we win that game. Maybe we advance through that series. It's a big what if for me moving forward, like the fact that those guys weren't out there on the floor. Jokic obviously destroyed us
Mhm.
all series, but Ayton, I just feel like it would have made things a different if he was on the floor, if CP had been out there and we had been able to give it our real shake. I mean, what made us a genuine championship contender in all of our eyes and in your eyes when we signed Durant was the fact that we had KD and Book, but we also had those other key pieces,
Yeah.
those other star players
Didn't
that
feel
you
like you
can.
gave up a heap for it.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And as a result, we didn't have the same kind of depth.
Mm.
But what we had was elite talent at the top end
Yep.
in those 4 in particular, and 2 of them weren't on the floor in that elimination game. And as a result, we got blown out, which is why, look, I feel like it's rough on Monty Williams to lose his job in that
Mm.
sort of situation.
Absolutely.
He's a terrific coach. It's a brutal business and a really cutthroat industry, head coaching positions most of all. And we've been bundled out in capitulations in elimination games of the playoffs the last 2 years. So didn't surprise me, but it also like I felt bad for him and I felt like he was the right guy for us moving forward. But just knowing the industry as I do, like it is a win or go home
Yeah.
sort of situation, and that's the reality for him and the Suns now moving forward.
Does DeAndre Ayton stay on the team?
Well, that's going to be really interesting to see. I,
Because
as a
at
Suns
one
fan,
point, sorry, at one point, you're saying he wasn't on the floor, right? I saw, and I'm just gonna go on the one play that he didn't even want to be on the floor when he was on the court. Like he was standing in the out of bounds and he was watching guys get rebounds. Like that one player, the poor guy, like he's had, that one microscope on that, where he's just watching people get rebounds, and he's like, "What do you want me to do?"
yeah, I mean, he can be a little frustrating at times in that
He's
regard, but
young.
he's sorry?
He's young. He's like centers
Yeah,
don't hit their prime to like 27, 28. He's got
exactly.
so much growth.
Yeah, for sure. And like he's very skilled. And he's a I think he's a key piece for us moving forward. If we can keep him and I would like to see us like bring the band back together.
Yeah, right.
CP is the interesting one for me because he's not getting any younger, and can he stay healthy through the bump and grind of a deep playoff run is a big question that's that needs to be answered. Can you find a different elite point guard to operate with this? Do you need an elite point guard or just someone different to run that group when you've got Book and KD? That's an interesting question for me, but I feel like Aiton's an important piece. I was wrapped with the fact that we were able to get KD and keep DeAndre Ayton
Yeah.
at the time. So I would be keen for the front office to keep him on the roster. I will say though, when I watch DeAndre Ayton, I'm constantly reminded of the fact that we didn't draft Luka Doncic. And of course, we have Book, and would that have worked? And it's that was the decision at the time. And obviously, Ayton was playing at Arizona, and the owner at the time was out of the University of Arizona, and you could see why he
Yep.
kind of that we went that way. But like Luka was coming in as a EuroLeague MVP, like it was obvious
Yep.
that he was going to be what he is, and we went in a different direction.
I think next year I wouldn't be surprised. I'm just gonna, I'm just guessing a lot of the time. A sign and trade CP3, Kyrie, and we end up with Aiton and CP3, and you guys get Kyrie in some weird way. Like the Mavs always swing for these superstars that are way past their prime and try to get anything out of them. I think, yeah, I don't know. That's my gut. I don't know if that works in a trade machine or not, but KD and Kyrie playing together, I wouldn't be surprised. And the Mavs just like taking CP3 on some huge contract. So
Okay, I
throw
don't
that out
tick
there.
that off as a Suns fan. I don't
You can
give
have
that
him.
I don't give that the tick of approval, but they're not asking me.
Let's talk about coaches. So you brought up Monty. So it seems like good coaches are getting the flick, especially this season, right? So we had Monty, Doc Rivers has just been let go. Nick Nurse, Coach Bud, who's 2 years removed from a championship. Silas and Dwayne Casey, they're not the greatest coaches. They're good coaches. They're former Mavs assistant coaches, but they also lost their jobs. Is this just like coaches lose their jobs every season, but this season seems like it's like good coaches are just getting removed seemingly like quite quickly.
Really good coaches.
Yeah.
Coaches who won titles in some of these cases with that organization not all that long ago.
Yeah. So Nick Nurse won, what was it, 4 years ago now? Bud, 2 years.
Yeah,
Monty,
amazing. I mean, it's a
conference
great
finals and
time
stuff.
to have a head coaching vacancy
Mm,
because, the guys that are potentially in the pool there that you could be talking to are really high caliber.
yeah.
The guys that you just talked about there, Monty, of course. So, as I said, man, it's brutal. Like, why would you want to be a head coach? Head coaches will always talk about the fact that you like you you're only one losing season away from getting fired in
Yeah.
the NBA. It is that cutthroat. Um, those organizations that have shown a bit more faith and grown with coaches sometimes and often will get rewarded for that. But yeah, to see these guys that have been like a really experienced former coaches of the year or championship winners in recent
Yeah.
times lose their jobs it's been
Because who are they
wild.
going to replace them with? Like, there's not this influx of like. Obviously, there's probably going to be like some musical chairs, and they probably all end up coaching each other's teams or whatever. But
Hmm. Mm.
there's not like 10 really good coaches out there that you're like, oh, this will be so much better than Bud or whatever.
Mm.
Who knows the team? Who's just won a championship? Doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. And I guess a lot of it comes down to like the fact that you've got your sort of franchise pieces as players. And if you feel like maybe the message is growing old or getting stale a little bit, and you need a kind of a big change to to the basketball side of things, it's usually not going to be with those franchise pieces, right?
Yeah,
It's not going to be with Giannis. Like he is the guy there in Milwaukee. And so if you need a change that's really going to shake things up, well, then it's the head coach.
yeah,
So I think that's what happens a lot of the times here. And that's certainly the case with a couple of these kind of guys. And yeah, but as you say, like really high caliber guys, and the grass is not always greener, and yet they get given the flick so
yeah.
regularly.
That's a nice little segue into chatting some NBL stuff. So Chase Buford, coming off 2 from 2, 2 championships with the Sydney Kings, and gets fired. Well, I'm sorry, doesn't get fired. They're no longer. He's no longer the coach, so they parted ways. The team didn't pick up his option, I believe. That's Was that a surprise to you, or is there some reasoning that isn't out yet?
Well, there is some reasoning that is out, which was interesting to kind of read and listen to yesterday, both from the reporting from guys like Olgun Ulich at ESPN and Matt Logue at News Corp, but also from the statement that came out from the club talking about the fact that Chase is exploring his NBA opportunities.
Yeah,
Not stating definitively that he has something that he's going to, but that he's looking to explore those opportunities and see what is potentially out there. And that the Kings got to a point in their deliberations where they needed a commitment. Now, the
right.
reporting from Olgun Ulit was to say that May 15 was the deadline to decide whether or not they were picking up his option for the upcoming season. And so it seems as though that deadline was set. Chase was saying, look, I still want to look at what this could potentially look like. Can you push that back a little bit? Can you give me more time? And the Kings got to a point where they clearly said, no, it is what it is, and it's going to be this way, which really surprises me
Yeah,
if there is nothing more to it. Because if there is nothing more to it, I mean, he is an unbelievably successful coach at the NBL level.
yeah,
To come in and win at the rate that he's done, and to just go bang bang back to back championships, like championships are really hard to win at that kind of elite level. And yeah, they've had talent for sure. They've had talent on those rosters, but teams have had talented rosters before, like really stacked rosters. I think of Melbourne United squads that
yeah,
Joey Wright was calling the most talented team since his '07 Bullets when Daniel Kickett arrived, and they had Jordan McRae draft and stash, and that team didn't make the finals.
yeah,
I think about Sydney Kings teams with Bogut and Randall and Kevin Lish, and you think, man, that has some serious that's 3 MVPs of the league
yeah,
on the same squad together, and they made the playoffs, but not the championship series. So to come in and go back to back like that, and for the club to get to a point where they felt like they just couldn't wait any longer, kind of befuddles me a
yeah,
little bit. I do find that element of it quite surprising. So yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, and kind of see if I can get a little bit more information about how it's all played out. But the bottom line is, um, they are going in separate ways now, and
mm,
we wait to see what that means for Chase Buford, whether he is going to be on an NBA bench next season, and if that does happen, I'm fascinated to see what kind of situation he lands in. Does he
yeah,
land on the front
mm,
of an NBA bench and it's a really good situation? It's the type of thing that he would have gone to as a step up from the head coach of the Sydney Kings anyway, or not? Does it result in something of a bit of a sideways move in that regards? I'm really interested to see how that all ends up playing out.
Yeah, especially with the Kings, it seem like they've got most of their team locked down, right? They're not going. We're emptying the cabinet here. We're just gonna totally reboot with a whole new team and a new coach. Like they have most of it sorted already. So you think you'd have the luxury of a bit more time to wait and see if you want the coach. We'll see if he can explore his options. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
especially when you talk about the local
mm,
group.
yeah,
I mean, they've basically got their local roster full. The whole bench unit is full.
yep,
Now they've got to kind of build out what's going to be the rest of their starting group. So imports. Now, it's hard to go out into any market and recruit free agents, whether they're locals or imports, without a head coach
yeah,
and without certainty about who that's going to be. That is hard to do, to sit down with a player. And, I've certainly found this over a period of time talking to potential next stars when teams weren't sure who, and I'm going to experience that in this next little while with Sydney, where if you can't talk to who the head coach is going to be and the player can't actually sit down and have a conversation and the agent with that coach, that makes things a bit tricky. So that would be what the Kings are thinking about, saying, well, in the next little while,
yeah.
we're going to need to sign our imports and know who those guys are going to be. So we're going to need to know who is going to be coaching the team.
Yeah, there you go. Let's talk about next stars. You just brought that up. So you have much more. Well, you are the guy now for the next star program, right? Your what's your sort of title with that?
My title,
I
I'm
was
the
gonna say you're
GM
like
of.
the president. You're the president of the next star program.
That's right. Let's roll with that. I'm El Presidente of the Next Stars. No, I'm the GM of Next Stars Recruitment,
Yeah,
which means basically I work hand in hand with the Commissioner, Jeremy Lowliger, on running the Next Stars program.
yeah. So how does next stars work? So yeah, just it seems like there's been like some understanding it, and there's stuff that's quite transparent. Other things you're like, oh, I don't really get the rules around it. So can you give us a real brief sort of idea of how it actually works for teams?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess what most people who have been following the league for a period of time know is that the Next Stars program is set up to attract NBA draft prospects from around the world to come and play in the NBL for a year potentially, or potentially more, elevate their draft stock, develop their game, have a terrific life experience, and then begin their careers and head off to the NBA draft and grow from there. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
program in a nutshell. It's seen some different iterations over a period of time when all of a sudden the draft and stash element of a player recruitment went from becoming an import like James Ennis or Devon Hall or these types of guys, Jordan McRae, to sitting within the Next Stars space. Didi Luzada and Justinian Jessup were examples of that. But predominantly, as the Next Stars program is set up to attract draft eligible players, Josh Giddey, LaMelo Ball, AJ Johnson, Alexander Sarr, these guys that are looking at an alternative pathway on their way from playing either high school ball in the American case, or maybe some pro ball in Europe, like was experienced with some of the French guys and others that have come here, Ariel Hookporty, or coming out of the junior ranks or the NBA Global Academy, the Center of Excellence, like what was Josh Giddey's experience, on their way to the NBA draft, an alternative pathway to go from here to there, and it's become a proven pathway in that regard and is attractive, real high level talent.
so how does it work? Are these guys all paid a set salary? Does the team get to decide how much they're paid? Does it come off the salary cap? What about those sorts of things?
The Next Stars salaries sit outside the salary cap, always has and always will be. So that's a really attractive element of recruiting these guys and working with these players from a team perspective. Um, the salary is not a set amount. It's a negotiated on a case by case basis, and then and obviously, as has been sort of stated previously, the league is involved in that process, in engaging the player, contracting the player, and then from that point, that then takes the decision about which team the next star is the prospect's going to play for, we take the financial element out of that decision.
Right.
So that's a pure basketball decision, which is a really kind of key component of the process. So that the league contracts the player, engages the player as they go through their period of time in the NBL. Their salary is paid by the league, by the NBL accounts department, not by that team. And so then the decision about who they're going to play for, as I say, is a pure basketball decision. Where the focus is on the fit, the role, the roster, the city in some instances, the coach, what's going to be a great spot for both the team, but also the prospect to make sure it's a win-win situation moving forward.
So the league then sits down with the front office of a team and says, "Hey, we'd like this. We think this player would be a good fit for you guys," or do the teams express interest? Like, okay, do you say there's a pool of next stars who would like this guy, and then you sort of put your hand up, and is that how it works?
It's a bit of a combination of all of that. One of the things that I'm trying to bring to the program in my role is a constant dialogue with the key decision makers at all of our 10 NBL teams in this space. So I'm in constant communication with with the coaches, the CEOs, the GMs about their roster, what that looks like moving forward, what it looks like right now, what it might potentially look like in the next stars this conversation as well. So I was in, like, let's use Alexander Sarr
Yeah,
as a case. Um, I was in
who's coming to
conversation with
Perth
Danny,
Wildcats? Yeah,
who's signed with the Perth
yeah,
Wildcats. Yeah, well, signed with the league and
yes,
the Perth Wildcats. Um, been constant communication with Danny as well as all the other key decision makers, as I said. But in constant communication with Danny about, well, what's the team going to look like next season? What's the team going to look like moving forward? In which kind of space would you be interested in a next star? And then as we kind of start to engage with players, I'll then start to sort of speak to these guys about potential next stars, not guys that have signed as next stars, but guys that we're in conversation with
yeah,
who could potentially come into the mix. Is this a guy that you'd be looking to engage with? Get a bit of a sense in that regard. And then from there, there's an expression of interest process. Then when we get to a pointy end in conversations with the player and their agents, their family, and there's a real strong interest in coming to the next stars, we then put out communications to all of the clubs to say, if there is a genuine interest to engage with this player, let us know within a period of time.
yeah.
And then we pick up those conversations from there. And from that point, the player and their team have the opportunity to meet with the key guys at those teams, have Zooms, essentially get presented to, pitched to, as to why they would be a great landing spot. And in the end, the decision lies primarily, almost wholly, really, with the player and their
Right.
group. Something we want them to make sure. We want the team to make sure that they're in the game pitching for a player that they really want,
Yeah.
and we want the player to land somewhere that they feel really confident and comfortable with, because we feel like that's the best opportunity to get a great result all round. So that's what happened with Alexander Sarr. He was really impressed with what Danny and John really presented. Felt like it was a really good fit. The role was exactly what he was looking for. The organization, the city, the fan base, and felt comfortable diving in and signing on with the Wildcats.
That's cool. So, one last one on this. So you essentially get to play God a bit, right? Like, you don't get to pick, like, you get to match up a player right with the team. So you do a lot of like the moving around. That's a pretty cool job. Like, it's a pretty cool role that you have within the league.
It's been really fun. I'm enjoying it. Like, it's my first sort of step into player personnel.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's a lot of the role that's evaluating talent, watching a lot of hoops that I wasn't previously watching. Right, watching a lot of kind of European leagues, younger leagues, like like these guys that are, for instance, coming through the French program, Rayan Repair, Usman Jiang. these guys have come through a place in France called INSEP, sort of like our Center of Excellence, our AIS.
Right.
Well, they play in the 3rd division of pro ball in France. I've
Right.
watched a lot of that over the past 6 months. Overtime Elite, a lot of G League, a lot of high school
Right.
stuff, and a lot of the kind of the junior stuff here in Australia as well. So I've been watching a lot of that, evaluating the talent, building my network of networks within, player agents, NBA scouts, NBA front offices, to be in conversation with, and then also building my relationships with those key decision makers and key guys, coaches and GMs around the league as well, which were already pretty strong, but have become stronger throughout this process. As now I'm not trying to like work with them and in the media space, but more so trying to
harass them for info.
for info or quotes or interviews. And
Yep.
now I'm trying to serve as a guy who can help them
Yep.
get a player that's going to help their team, help their club, help the league overall.
Yeah, that's cool. Sounds like you'll be a GM at some point. Maybe head over the Mavericks and do something there. Sorry, I just keep thinking about the Mavs. Sort of poor front office. Anyways, let's I've got some questions from people that have put in on our Instagram, BackChat_basketball. Before we do that, just one team, your way too early prediction for next season championship
For the NBL?
for the NBL, yeah.
I tell you, I've been really impressed with what Melbourne have put together.
Melbourne it is.
Melbourne United, I mean,
Okay.
Joe Luala-Chul's back. They've got Luke Travers. Ariel Hook-Porty's back. Daly's back. Shea Illy's a kind of a key guy. Of course, we wait to see how healthy he's going to be. Chris Golding's still on that roster.
Yep.
All of that, we haven't even, that's not even talking about a single import at this point. I feel like Tanner Krebs was a really savvy pickup in free agency as well. So they are stacked. They're loaded. And last time they loaded up a bit like this, for me, was that season, that 2021 season that they won the title with Jock Landale as the grand final MVP.
Yep.
And they had Scotty Hobson as their import coming off the bench. And I feel like they're loading up in a kind of a similar style like that.
All right, Melbourne. There you go. All right, this is from James.Cockman. What is your commentary career highlight? We'll go with that one. There's a few questions there, but that's a good one.
That is a cool question. I think calling the NBL Championship Series is my highlight.
Yep.
I've done that, I think, the last 5 years in a row now. But to be involved in those games at that really pointy end of proceedings, it's a real honor. It's a privilege. It's a huge responsibility that I don't take lightly, because I think it's an amazing league. I love being a part of it. I've loved it my whole life, the NBL. And so to be involved in calling those games, the games that are going to actually decide who hoists the championship trophy when all is said and done, they're my highlight, being involved in those.
That's cool. From Chelsea_S, did Broni James consider playing in the NBL Next Stars program?
We were in the conversation. We were in the mix.
That's cool.
Now I'm not going to speak for Broni specifically, but I can say that we're in the mix. We made sure that we were a part of that decision-making process, and that, we presented ourselves as a real viable option. It was, and we came correct as well. Like, there was no messing about. It was obviously going to be, a really competitive landscape, the recruiting landscape for Broni. You would have seen some valuations about him in terms of name, image, and likeness moving into next season. And he had some great options at the collegiate level, of course. Landed at USC, but, others like Oregon and Ohio State that were well discussed publicly. But we made sure that we were in that mix, and we presented ourselves as an alternative pathway. And in the end, unfortunately, it went a different direction.
Almost like a blessing. Like, it would have been amazing for Broni to come to the NBL, but then you're the guy that's, I'm sure there's more decision makers, not just you, like going, okay, you're going to go play for that team. But like, Broni would have ended up on one NBL team, and whether he'll be, I think he'll be a very good player, but you guarantee a team like they'll sell out of jerseys, they'll pack stadiums. Like that's a huge piece to give an NBL franchise, right? And you probably would have been one of the key decision makers in that happening.
Well, again, as I said before, it's the athlete who decides at the end of the day. You
Right.
know, like I didn't decide that Alexander Sarr was going to go to the Wildcats.
Yeah.
Alexander and his team ended up deciding
Right.
that.
Right.
I didn't decide that AJ Johnson was going to go to the Hawks. He and his group eventually decided that it was going to be
Yeah.
with Illawarra. But
I guess
being
every
part of
team would
that,
have put their hand up for Bronny James, so it would have been completely up to him to pick.
exactly.
Yeah. There you go. One last one before I let you go from Nick Tan 77. Should the NBL be increasing the number of games per season as more teams are added?
Um, as more teams are added, I mean, yeah, I think we need to have that conversation. I think with 10 teams right now, the 28 game season, I think is a sweet spot.
Yep.
And I don't see the necessity to kind of increase that number at this point. And comes as no surprise to everyone. It's old news, but one of the really great selling points for the NBL internationally and recruiting imports and Next Stars and the like is the fact that it's a reasonably short season. It's
Yep.
short, sharp. It starts in the start of October, but it finishes in March, maybe early April. And if you're a high level player, you can potentially pick up another short term contract elsewhere. And we've seen guys doing that left and right
Yeah.
this year. Mitch Creek and Gary Brown, those guys playing over in Puerto Rico, but then Milton Doyle and Brady Manick. And look, there's guys all over Europe right now. Some guys have jumped over to Japan. Sam Frolling's just returned from his experience over there. That's a real positive. And then certainly from a Next Stars perspective, the draft prospects, the ability to finish the season early, get over to the States, start their draft preparation, get their individual workouts in, get their body right so that they hit the team workouts, the combine, those types of things in peak nick is
Yeah.
a real positive. I mean, it's something that separates us from the European situation where those guys need to grind it out. I mean, those leagues are looking to start their playoffs here in the next little while in late May.
Yeah.
And we're heading real close to the draft. We're heading real close. I mean, the combine's happening right now this week, and
Yep.
some of those guys, like obviously Wemby, but also a guy like Bilal Coulibaly, they're not there right now, involved in that process, having those interviews with teams and the like. So, and then the other part, of course, is where our league sits within the Australian sporting landscape. When you factor in the winter competitions of footy and rugby that are real Goliaths, of course, from
Yep.
a TV and a commercial perspective in this landscape as well. The fact that we sit where we do because of the number of games and what we have right now, I think works. But you're right, as the league grows in number of teams, it's certainly a conversation that will need to take place to assess whether or not it will help the league eventually to increase the number of games.
Very good, Liam. Thank you so much for giving up your time today on the BackChat Basketball Show. One last quick one from me. You a footy fan? AFL? When I say footy,
I am.
which team?
Well, I'm an Essendon Bombers
Okay.
fan.
Okay.
So my mum grew up right around the corner from Windy Hill.
Great.
My dad, the Santamaria household, the Italian blood flowing throughout, were all Carlton supporters.
Of course.
So when I was a little tacker, I was the youngest of three boys. One went for Carlton, one went for Essendon, and essentially when I came along, I was up for grabs.
Yep.
So in my baby photos, some are with Carlton stuff on, some are with Essendon, and of course my mum won out, and I became a Bomber. And when I was really tiny, back-to-back premierships in '84 and '85, the baby
Yep.
Bombers in '93, the heartbreak of '99, and then the dominance of 2000. But I tell you, it's been a
rough.
tough trot ever since.
Yeah. That's okay. It'll come around again. It
Well, I
always
hope
does.
so.
Yeah.
100%.
Unless you're St Kilda or something. All right, thanks again, mate. I would like to chat to you again soon. Maybe when the season comes a bit closer, we can talk about the NBL a bit more. But appreciate you giving up some time. And if you're listening now, we'll have Reece Fague, I think, next week. We've recorded that, so that'll be on the BackChat Basketball Show. You can email us hello@backchatpodcast.com.au. Send us a message on Instagram, backchat_basketball. Liam, thanks again.
Thanks heaps for having me.